Good evening, and welcome to our Candidates Forum. My name is Dale Heisel. I'm the chairman of the board of the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome all of you tonight. This event is sponsored by the Salina League of Women Voters and the Chamber of Commerce. I'd also like to thank Kansas Wesleyan for being our host this evening. Candidates featured tonight will be for the races of the Saline County Commission race, the Kansas State Legislature 69th District, and the 1st U.S. Congressional District. There is profile information that was available when you walked in over to my right. You'll also be able to obtain that information by the Chamber's and the League's websites or at the Chamber office and the Saline County Clerk's office. We're dividing this evening into 3 segments. The first segment, as I said, was the Saline County Commission race. We have our 2 candidates, Stephanie Kuhl, Democrat, and Monty Shadrick, the Republican. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Abner Perney, President of the Salina League of Women Voters, to review with you the rules and the format for this evening. Abner?
Again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Salina, we welcome you to this important public service event. The forum is being recorded and broadcast live by Salina Community Access TV, and then it's also being recorded by KOOD, Smoky Hills Public Television, for later broadcast. And of course, Access TV will also be replaying this, but broadcast before the election, which is November 4th. This time I need to direct your attention to the front row. At the center are our timekeepers, really over here kind of left of center, stage left of center. Carmen Wilson and Diana Tarver, who are our longtime league members and have experience, so that'll be helpful tonight. One will check the time while the other will hold up a red sign to let the candidates know their time is up, and we will go on to the next speaker or to the next question. To the right is, over here, is the screening committee for the questions to be submitted by the audience, and you can start doing that any time for any of the 3 races. The questions will be screened and consolidated as needed by Ann Zimmerman, Sue Holmes, Carol Vire, and Salina Chamber President Dennis Lauber. He is here. Okay, I hadn't seen that he was in residence till just now. Don Weiser of the Salina Chamber and David Norland of the Salina League made the arrangements for this evening. Mr. Weiser compiled the Chamber's profiles for candidates, and Lori Troe of the Salina League compiled voters' guides, which are slightly different groups of questions with answers in writing from the candidates. These are available actually both front entrances of the room here of Sam's Chapel. They're also available are sample ballots for the 3 congressional districts in Saline County. They're slightly different, so you base it on your state congressional district. So these are hot off the press and available also. The pads and pencils are provided for audience members to write down questions for candidates. League members will collect those and turn them into the screeners. Please just hold up your hand if you need to get their attention, and we'll be moving right along. It's time for the ground rules, because we have rules. Each candidate has 1 minute for an opening presentation, 1 minute to answer each question, and 1 minute for closing remarks. And we ask that they please pay attention to the timekeepers. The order of answering questions will be alternated, so each candidate will have the opportunity to be the first to answer. All questions will come from the audience or from the media panel. For the audience, again, please, when you're writing your questions, please do not direct the question that's only applicable to one specific candidate. We are looking for questions of policy, philosophy, and intent to serve in the next term for each one of these candidates, and so we want them to be issue-oriented and general enough that each candidate for each office can respond fully to the question. The screening committee may eliminate questions that we feel are too, or that are non-issue questions. We'll ask as many different questions as time allows. We hope you understand it, that if your question is not used, or that it may be reworded to shorten or clarify its meaning just to reduce redundancy and to keep things moving along. Why is that alarm going off? Sorry. No one knew it was set. That said, it's time for the 1-minute opening remarks for the County Commission candidates. And we're going in alphabetical order. Stephanie Kuhl will be first to make her 1-minute opening remark.
For the past 2 years, Saline County has been receiving a great deal of press. Huffington Post, Rolling Stone Magazine, and The Jon Stewart Show, just to name a few. Tomorrow will be no exception, as TV cameras were rolling in today's open session. Negative headlines on a local as well as a national level have got to stop. Saline County citizens deserve and should demand greater leadership from our commissioners. I've never had becoming a politician on my bucket list, but I decided that I could no longer sit back and watch. As a woman, a wife, a mom, an HR professional, and a business owner, I believe I can help to create positive headlines for Saline County. Thank you to the Chamber and the League of Women Voters for hosting this event tonight. I look forward to your questions.
Good evening, I'm Monty Shadwick, and I'm the Republican candidate for the office. I am an assistant professor here at Kansas Wesleyan in the business department, so welcome to campus. I'm also the owner of Blue Sky Brewery downtown. I have been elected twice to public office. I've served 8 years as a city commissioner here in Salina and twice as mayor. I have also had experience in government working for Congressman Jerry Moran for 4 years. My job was to travel the 69 counties of his district and work with counties and local governments. I've been married to my wife for 25 years, have 4 kids, and I'm seeking public office this time to make a fundamental change in the way county government operates. I think we need elected officials that want to serve for the love of community instead of running for a job, health benefits, or retirement. And looking forward to talking about ways that we can do that tonight. Thank you.
And now we're going to move into our questions from the media. We have with us tonight Ben Waring of the Salina Journal, Randy Picking of Eagle Media Center, and Todd Pittenger of the Salina Media Group. Ben, would you like to take the first questions for our candidates?
The director of the health department, Bronson Farmer, resigned today. What would you like to see in his replacement, and would it matter to you or to the people of the health department if that person that replaced him is a woman?
Is it my turn?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I just heard about that about 15 minutes ago, so I wasn't aware of what happened. Obviously, that was a very controversial hiring in the past. I wasn't a part of that. Obviously, didn't get to see any of the resumes or anything, so can't necessarily comment about that. But it's obviously a position that's just critical for the health department for Saline County, and making that choice and making the right choice is going to be at the forefront of whoever's on the commission. You know, we need somebody. I mean, our city county health department was a model for many, many years, and I think that has suffered recently, and I think that the person that we hire for that has got a tough job to do. We've got to make some changes there. I'm looking forward to being part of that process. I'll look forward to asking the right questions, getting input from the community, and putting the right person in charge.
Over 140 years worth of knowledge and expertise has walked out of Saline County Health Department in the last year. Regardless of whether it's a man or a woman, we have to have a leader who can get in there and address our county's health concerns. We've lost our infectious disease specialist, which can be, in the times of Ebola right now, very concerning for our citizens. We need to get an individual in there who can assume and take over the leadership role and guide the remaining individuals and the experts that are left with our health department down the right direction.
Currently, the health department's a standalone county department. Would you perhaps entertain seeing it being a joint venture once again with the city and the county?
If the city and county can work together as they did successfully for over 60 years, I definitely think that it is something worth pursuing. We have seen with the county taking over the health department quite a bit of what I would call micromanaging, and individuals who lack expertise regarding healthcare and women making decisions. If that joint relationship will foster better decision making, then I don't have a problem with it. I do know it was actually, we discussed it today, or they discussed it, I listened, and there will be some changes because of the fact that they were kind of grandfathered in. So there'll be some hurdles to overcome, but I don't have a problem against it.
I think that it's interesting what happened in this process of going through the health department is the county took it over. And that's a little bit of what consolidation looks like. I thought it was fair in the aspect that, you know, now everybody in the county pays the exact same amount to fund the health department as opposed to when it's city and county and the citizens of Salina pay twice. So in that respect, it's okay. I would be disappointed if it stayed the same way and we micromanaged the county commission. I think if we get to the point where we have an effective leader at the health department and allow them to do their job, and you put together a health board that advises the county commission, then I'm fine with it staying with just the county.
Well, Monty, you said the C word there. You said consolidation. It seems every county election, the word consolidation comes up. I want to ask you, is consolidation, is that a dead issue now? Has that come up too much? Should the city and county consolidate, or are there ways where they already work together that those can be expanded?
Right. Todd, I'm for efficiencies in government wherever that can happen. And so if there's ways that the city and county can work together to be more efficient, to spend taxpayer dollars better, I'll be all for that. And we'll be happy to look at ways to do that. There are ways that we're already working together and doing fine. I think that my experience on the city commission is going to be helpful in any of those conversations. I think the thing that frustrates me a little bit about consolidation when somebody talks about it is they come up with reasons why it shouldn't happen. Well, I haven't even seen a plan yet. You know, there's nothing out there that even talks about it. I do believe, however, that, you know, we're within a generation of counties consolidating. I just think that you just have to look for those efficiencies. So as far as a county commissioner, I'll make sure that the rural area, the rural citizens are going to be at the table if any type of conversation like that comes to the forefront. But yes, I'd obviously look at any way to be more efficient.
There currently are approximately 43 interlocal agreements where the city and county are working successfully together. I know that in the past there's been issues. I was out at Road and Bridge today discussing, they asked me to look at their list and they said, what do you want to talk about on here? And I picked something to the effect of, it had to do with shared maintenance of roads. And when the city expands, and who's going to pay for the shared maintenance of those roads? Is it going to be the county? Is it going to be the city? And that's where the trouble seems to lie. If we can find ways to work together, we must continue to do so. The county and the city have different goals. In speaking with David Neal, the planner, you know, the county is in charge of preserving agriculture. The city is in charge of the infrastructure and the infill. And thank you. I'll learn.
Can you give us your views on the Drive for Five and whether you approve of the idea of expanding the Saline County Commission by 2 members?
Is it my turn? I definitely support the expansion of the county commissioners. This position, as Monty alluded to in his opening statement, has turned into a job for some people. And we need to have individuals that are committed to serving our county as volunteers or at a small stipend. I truly believe that if we can change the roles and the responsibilities of the current commissioners to one of more oversight and just providing a vision and a direction for our county, that we're going to be great. I think by increasing the commission size, we'll be able to attract quality individuals, more diverse individuals from different backgrounds who can bring more levels of interest and experience to the table. So I think it's a great idea.
I was one of the early signers of the petition, and I will also vote for it in November. I think that 5 members, I served on a 5-member board for the City Commission, and I think it allows for more diversity of thoughts and ideas, and I think that that can be helpful. I think it also is very helpful to keep 1 member from dominating. That can happen with 3. There are other things that are nice about that, but I would be happy to serve on a 3-member board or a 5-member board, so I'll be happy to serve either way. The downsides that I'm nervous about is if it stays the same. If you pay full-time employees, if you micromanage the county administrator, then I'm a little nervous about that. We don't need to make the situation worse. I think if we went to 5 members and then it became more of a board of directors type of situation, I think that would work very well.
Does Saline County need to look at increasing wages for county employees?
Always. We always need to be competitive. As we've seen recently, I mean, we're having positions that aren't being filled, and a lot of that comes down to the wage issues. We went through this when I was on the City Commission years ago, and we had to do a wage survey, and we had to figure out where we were lacking and where we could do better. I think that would be appropriate for us to do in this situation, and it just costs money to hire the best and the brightest.
Our employees are our greatest asset. Any business owner knows and understands that. We have to take care of our people. Road and Bridge, again today, shared with me that they're short 6 positions. People are leaving because of the wages. They're leaving because of the conditions, you know, the building has fallen apart, those kinds of things. We have to make sure that we've got measures in place, not only financially, but an infrastructure to support our employees. They gave me an example of where, you know, an individual making, I believe, starting wage is $11.51 an hour. By the time capers is taken out and insurance and taxes, this is bringing these people down to, you know, $8, $9 an hour, which is difficult for them to maintain a living. And they can go across town to another private sector employer and get better wages. So we need to do what we can to preserve and maintain the employees that we have.
Sticking with the same topic of wages and salary, a 2-pronged question. Do you think the current county commission pay structure for commissioners, do you think it is too much? And if so, if elected, would you try to change it?
Yes and yes. It's real simple. You know, again, as you're analyzing, you know, in touring the sheriff's department and listening to the people that are working there, you know, these commissioners who are working 1 day a week, 8 hours a day at best, and then going out and really getting paid to serve on a board that you and I would be volunteering on. There's something wrong with that structure when the commissioners are making that kind of money. I would like to see us, if the Drive for Five expands, take that salary, divide it by 5. Let's analyze how much work is really being done. What do they need to be really in charge of? Are there ways we can streamline that position and look at reducing those salaries? So
It needs to change, and it'll be a high priority for me. We all serve on boards in the community, and we do this for the love of community. I've been chair of the Red Cross before where we had 3 natural disasters in 1 year. I mean, and you just spend time on that. School board doesn't get paid. City commissioners get paid $300 a month. This is just what we do to make Saline County a better place. So it's not appropriate to be paid, and it's not appropriate to take health insurance. It's not appropriate to have retirement. I will work to change that. If I can't get that changed, then I will not accept the salary.
Are you in favor or against the proposed $46.5 million expansion of the Saline County Jail and the Justice Center?
I think that the price tag was too high. I would have probably chosen one of the other alternatives. I think we need fewer people in jail, not more. I think jails are very expensive. I think that it needs to be reserved for people that are a threat to society, threat to us on an individual basis. I don't think that it needs to be a place for a debtor's prison or for people that drive with suspended licenses. Very expensive. There are alternative ways to do that. Yes, that costs money, but it doesn't cost $45 million. That being said about the jail, I do think that there's a critical need to redo and make safer the 3rd floor. I do think it makes sense to have a criminal justice one-stop shop where community corrections and everybody is in an area, and I would work more to do that.
I will be supporting the jail. I, again, have had the opportunity to tour the facilities. I visited with Annie Grievous over at Community Corrections. We have some serious issues. I'm sure many of you in this audience tonight have served as a juror. How many of you have sat there and watched them escort prisoners by you as you're waiting to be called? How many of you have seen the victims' families, the witness for the prosecution, the witness for the defense? We have a very unsafe environment right now on the 3rd floor, as Monty alluded to. Until the legislature changes sentencing guidelines and the workload of the courts is reduced, I don't know what other choice we have. Jail is not for rehabilitation. That's what prisons are for. The average length of stay is maybe around 30. I don't want to say, I don't want to get misquoted, but we don't have enough time to take care of them when they're in our jails. We need to make sure the community has got programs for them outside of. So yes, I will be supporting the initiative.
Within the next few years, the Livestock and Expo Center will be needing to leave Kenwood Park. Your thoughts about another location? How big an Expo Center does Saline County need?
I think the voters spoke very clearly on that issue when it came up the last time. As I understand the arrangements with the city, it comes up in 2019, but they do have the option to renew leases. I'll be real honest with you, I haven't studied a lot of that because it's not been an issue this year. Certainly, I would be willing to look at that, but again, it's not my decision. It's up to the community to make those kinds of decisions and determine the needs for our community. The study is published on the website. It's a very extensive study stating the needs and the comparisons of other counties and what they've done and their needs, and I think they've done a great job on that, but again, the citizens said no.
Yeah, again, it's my understanding that the lease is up, that they're not necessarily having to leave at that point. So again, that maybe is just a little bit more cooperation between the city and the county trying to work things out. If that is the best location and we can work out something, that would be the optimal situation. The voters were very specific, very clear about them not wanting a huge expo center, so I would not want to bring that up. But if we couldn't have it at the same location and we had to go somewhere else, this would be a situation where I just would take the input of the citizens of Saline County and move on from there.
Well, we want to thank the media panel. We are going to open it up now with questions from the audience, and Abner has a large list of them.
Or at least a small pile, at any rate.
Okay.
Okay, we're switching, and Mr. Shadwick is going to go first. The first question that we have is, if elected, how are you preparing to hit the ground running and to be ready to make the tough decisions on day one?
To hit the ground running, partly of that is just my experience. I've been a city commissioner for 8 years. I've worked in situations like this, so I understand the issues. I also, as my time with Congressman Moran, have worked with all 69 counties. I've been to the road and bridge people. I've visited all the critical care hospitals. I've talked to sheriffs around the state. So I already have the background, I have the experience, and I understand the uniqueness of county government, and I think that'll be very helpful for me as we get going.
I've been in situations where I've been put to the task of jumping right in and helping to take over, so I'm definitely up to that challenge. The past 6 months when I made the decision to run, I off and on throughout the summer have been attending the county commission meetings. Prior to that, I was reviewing the minutes, as great as that may sound. But I also spent, since the election, with the exception of August 12th, have been at every single county commission meeting consistently, trying to understand what are the issues, what is the county facing, what would I be faced with when I walk in that door in January. So I'm trying to do everything I can to prepare for that. And I'm not afraid of the task. I have a history of getting in there and learning what it is I need to do, and will do it well.
Thank you. One of the big issues always is money. So what are your county budget priorities, and what would you change in the budget?
Funding is going to continue to be an issue. Our federal government and our state governments are putting more and more of that burden on us at the county level. And we will have to find ways to create revenue streams. When machinery and equipment was taxed, that was, I think, approximately $670,000 that our county lost. When the fees for the Register of Deeds is being phased out, I want to say over $500,000. That department alone, the Register of Deeds office, was self-supporting, and they actually helped fund other departments. We're going to have to get pretty creative. Unfortunately, it may result in a higher tax base. I will study the issues and try to do what's best for the community and our people. We can't continue to not fund and not fund and not fund because we're losing people and our buildings are falling down.
Always the role of local governments, whether it's cities or counties, is trying to fund essential services, and that's where our priorities always need to be. Roads and bridges. If you're in the city, it's sewer and water. And so, I mean, that's our priority. Law enforcement, protecting the citizens, that'll be a priority, and you just have to pay for those things. It just has to happen. We can always, though, be more efficient with government, and I think that as transfer money from the state and the federal government becomes fewer and fewer, we just have to be more creative. We have to work together. We have to work with the city. This is my point about working with the city and becoming more efficient. It's basically, in 85% of the time, it's the same taxpayer. So we have to be able to look at ways that we can not necessarily cut, but just be more efficient.
Next question. Do you intend to adopt or support, let's say, a stronger county administrator form of government? And I guess this is kind of a follow-up question to the previous comment.
Well, absolutely for me. I mean, I do believe more in the board of directors form of running a government. I don't think that you can find 3 or 5 people necessarily that are qualified on a day-to-day basis to run a $37 million corporation. You need to be able to empower the county administrator to put together a team to run that corporation. And in our role as county commissioners would be, let's make sure that we're getting input from the citizens. Let's make sure that we're asking the right people, the questions, making sure that we're putting the right people in place and then holding them accountable. So I do believe that changes need to happen there.
And I've made it very clear my position on having a professional administrator lead our county. We have a great team of professionals working for our county. We are very, very fortunate on that behalf. And we need to make sure that we are empowering them to make their decisions and that they have a consistent boss, if you will. The fact that we have bosses, as they call themselves, changing every 2 years can be difficult on employees, and I think it's important that we try to maintain some continuity there so that we can grow and we can have that continuum of the information being passed on and really be able to grow. The complexities of county government have gotten to the point where we need an expert running the day-to-day operations.
The media panel brought up consolidation discussion, and I actually have 4 questions from the audience. I think I'm going to just go with this one if that works out well. If consolidation occurs or is brought up again for discussion, the unified government of Saline County was formed. How do you view that the other towns, Assaria, Bavaria, Brookville, Gypsum, Smolin, be accommodated, or would they, or do you have any idea how they would fit into that sort of consolidation?
I think it's important that we make sure that our smaller communities have a voice in our county government. I'm not an advocate of consolidation for that fact, for one of those facts. But these people deserve a voice. They need to make sure that they have representation at the table. We need to make sure that we're not restricting them so much that they feel alienated. Haven't really given it much more thought than that, so.
That's a good question, and I just think that, I mean, when consolidation gets brought up, again, I said it earlier, there's not a plan out there for us to look at, and it's always, again, interesting to me that somebody will say, well, you know, if consolidation happens, is the city going to go out into the county and to give us protection, police protection? And I'm like, well, you know, I've never seen a plan that said that the sheriff would go away or county, you know, law enforcement would go away. It makes more sense to me to have an elected sheriff running the law enforcement for the entire county. But those are decisions that the public is going to make, and it's going to take years and years of meetings, conversations, and thinking about it. And this just isn't something that the county commission is going to shove down anybody's throat. This if there is a groundswell. If there's not, then that's fine. But if there's a groundswell to be more efficient and look at ways that city and county can work together, it's going to come from the public, and it's going to take a lot of time. And we're not going to leave our friends and families separated. I mean, you know, we're all from Saline County. We want all the best for Saline County, for all of us.
Okay. How can you, as county commissioner, how can the county commission reverse the negative press of recent days?
I was very happy that I was a city commissioner for 8 years and never made the front page. So that was kind of a mini congratulatory thing for me. It was my goal to not be on the front page of this in this situation. So I just think that, you know, sometimes you need to listen more than talk. And I think that, you know, you don't seem to, you know, I don't want to be a person that seems to know everything. I know my limitations. And I think a lot of it is just, you know, being approachable, listening to the public, asking the right questions, putting the right people in charge, and letting things go. And I think that that's kind of my form of management, and I think that'll be my form of governance also.
My answer would be having a filter. I think it's important to sit back, and you don't always have to give an immediate response. I think we have to sit back and listen to what people are saying and make sure that you're giving thoughtful contemplation before you speak. There's some kind of a post that says, you know, think twice before you do it here, think, you know, another time before you do it here, and think 10 times before you post it on Facebook. Those are the kind of things that we need to take into consideration as county officials and elected officials. We need to think before we speak. It's a lesson that many of us learned a long time ago, and I think it's simple enough that I will do so.
Okay, this is going to be the last question. Try not to be too overly enthused. No. This is the visionary question. What areas do you see Saline County and Salina in leading the rest of the state?
We have a very highly respected road and bridge department. I believe our health department has also been able to maintain their respect throughout the state despite what they've gone through. And I think that we have some great role models in both of those departments that we can share that wealth of information to others across the state. It's not to say that the other departments don't. Those are just the two that are fresh on my mind today. But if we can be creating these programs and helping share that information with other cities in our county, I think we'll be a great leader.
I think my vision for Saline County and how we can show the state some ways to be more efficient in government is just to start having a conversation where city and county, it's not we versus them. Find ways for counties and cities to work together to be more efficient with taxpayer dollars. And I think that we can, I think that after 3 or 4 or 5 years, we can get some things done, we can create some efficiencies, and I think we can be a great role model in that way for other counties throughout the state.
Thank you. We're going to move into the closing comments, and you have 1 minute. And Monty Chadwick.
I think Saline County is in a unique situation right now, and a great situation is that you can't go wrong with either one of the candidates up here. I think Stephanie would do a fantastic job, as well as I think I would do a good job. So I think that the voters are in a good situation. I think, though, that the one thing that would be a difference between us is just my experience. My experience as a business person creating jobs, my experience as an educator, my experience as a city commissioner and mayor, and most importantly, my experience working with Congressman Jerry Moran in traveling the states. I understand the uniqueness of county government. I think I would represent you well, and I ask for your vote in November, and thank you for being here.
The opportunity to serve the public as county commissioner is a high honor and confers a sacred trust to the office holder. Stewardship of the public trust not only requires allegiance to the law, but also obligates a county commissioner to act in ways consistent with the highest standards of ethical conduct. A county commissioner should model decorum, respect for others, and civility in all public relationships. A county commissioner should perform the duties of public office with fairness and impartiality so as to enhance the public confidence. These words, taken from the Code of Ethical Conduct for County Commissioners, will be the foundation and the guideposts if I'm elected your Saline County Commissioner. It's time to change history. It's time for a new face, a new voice, and a new vision. And I hope you'll elect me on November 4th. Thank you to the Chamber and the League for having us here today.
There is one unusual circumstance in this year's election that I've asked to be able to summarize briefly. I want everyone to be aware that there are 3, depending if you live outside the city of Salina, and 4 if you live in the city of Salina, questions on the ballot, and that's an unusual number. So try to summarize those real quickly. Everyone in the state gets to vote on a state constitution amendment. Currently, the state's constitution bans certain lotteries. A raffle is a lottery and is currently illegal under our present law. A yes vote on this proposition would permit charitable raffles operated or conducted by religious, charitable, fraternal, educational, and veterans nonprofit organizations. A no vote would leave the law as it is, and such raffles would remain illegal. In Saline County, all Saline County voters will get 2 voter ballot questions. The first and simplest says simply, shall the Board of Saline County Commissioners change the number of county commission districts from 3 county commission districts to 5 county commission districts? A yes vote would require the present commission to redistrict the county into 5 districts of equal population and to establish an operating plan and proposed budget for the new commission to take effect early in 2015. The governor would appoint 2 new commissioners to serve terms until the next election cycle in November 2016, and those new commissioners would then take office in January 2017. A no vote leaves the county commission at 3 members in 3 districts. Second ballot question for the entire county is the jail sales tax. Jail and court complex with a budget of $46.5 million to be financed with a half percent sales tax for 15 years. A yes vote approves the proposed construction project and the sales tax. A no vote would end consideration of that particular proposal. In the city of Salina only, voters will be asked to vote on a proposal to repeal the 1968 ordinance that authorizes fluoridation of water in the city's water system. A yes vote stops fluoridation. A no vote continues the city's present policy of adding fluoride to the treated water in the city's water supply system. As in every election year, you also have the opportunity to vote yes or no for judges at the state level. You can find evaluations and comments on the performance of those judges by looking on the internet at kansasjudgereview.org, and we encourage voters to do that before you're presented with the ballot. Voter registration closes a week from today, October 14th, if you need to change your registration or are a new voter. Advanced balloting then begins on October 15th, and you can get a ballot in advance, study it carefully, and vote anytime up until Election Day itself, which is November 4th. At this point, thank you, candidates. We'll now take a short break and start session 2.
Welcome to this session of our Candidates Forum. Again, my name is Dale Heisel. I'm chairman of the board of the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. Tonight's event is sponsored by the League of Women Voters and the Chamber of Commerce. I also want to thank Kansas Wesleyan for hosting us tonight. This session is going to be the Kansas State Legislature race for the 69th District. As mentioned earlier, we have printed forms in the entryways. You'll also be able to get the candidates' profiles off the Chamber's or the League's websites at the Chamber office or at the Saline County Clerk's office. Our two candidates tonight are J.R. Clays and Gary Schwarzendruber. I'd like to introduce Abner Perney, president of the Salina League of Women Voters, to review the format and our rules.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Salina, I welcome you again to this public service event. This forum is being recorded by Community Access TV and actually being broadcast live on Salina Cable 21 and on their internet broadcasting system. Then also KOOD Smoky Hills Public Television from Bunker Hill is recording this event for broadcast before Election Day. Remind you all that Election Day is Tuesday, November 4th. This time I want to direct your attention to the front row. We have Carmen Wilson and Diana Tarver, who are experienced long-time volunteers with the League. They will be timing, and we'll hold up a red sign to let the candidates know that their time is up. There will also be an audio signal that their 1 minute is up. To the right is a question screening committee made up of the League members Ann Zimmerman, Sue Holmes, Carol Vire, and of Salina Chamber President Dennis Lauber. These folks will be reviewing questions and forwarding up here for the audience question portion of the forum. Don Weiser of the Salina Chamber and David Norland of the Salina League made the arrangements for this evening. We especially thank Kansas Wesleyan University, are anchoring our city and providing liberal arts education opportunities since 1886. And this is the first time that our forum has been held here, thanks to the university. Both Don Weiser and Lori Troe of the Salina League compiled voters' guides. They're slightly different. They're available at the front entrances both sides. Also available are copies of the sample ballot for each of the 3 state congressional districts, because they vary a little bit, but the sample ballots are available also out at the tables on the entrances, both sides of the sage here. Pads and pencils are provided for the audience members to write down questions for candidates. League members will collect those questions and take them to the screeners. Please hold up your hand if you need to get their attention. Here are the ground rules or the operating plan for this forum. Each candidate has 1 minute for an opening presentation, 1 minute to answer each question, and 1 minute for closing remarks. And we ask them to please pay attention to the timekeepers. The order of answering questions will be alternated. They're going to do this themselves, so each candidate takes turns at being the first to answer each question. All questions come either from the audience in this written form that I will read or from the media panel. We ask that the audience, if you're writing your questions, do not direct a question to one specific candidate. Make them issue-oriented and general so that each candidate can respond. Questions directed toward one candidate will be eliminated by the screening committee. We will ask as many questions as we can in the allotted time. We hope you understand that your question may not be used or may be reworded to shorten or clarify it. This will be done in the interest of reducing redundancy and covering as many subjects as possible. That said, it's time for the 1-minute opening remarks for the candidates for Kansas State District, Legislative District 69, and Mr. Clays will start.
Thanks, Abner. Thanks to the League of Women Voters. Thank you to the Salina Chamber of Commerce, Kansas Wesleyan University, and of course Access TV, who is filming tonight. Really appreciate you all coming out here tonight. It's great to see so many folks come out for the local government portion of this, as local government is the part that's closest to you and really has the most impact on your day-to-day life. I'm J.R. Clays. I am your state representative in the 69th District serving West Salina and Northwest Saline County. It's an honor to serve as your state representative. I'm running on a record that includes job growth, reducing taxation, economic incentives for our small businesses to create growth here in Salina and Saline County, as well as respecting our teachers, passing legislation that's going to give teacher raises and all-day kindergarten for Salina schools, the largest school district in the state without it. Again, an honor to serve you, and I appreciate you coming out tonight.
Good evening. I'm glad you're all here. My appreciation to the League and the Chamber and KW for hosting. I'm Gary Schwarzenegger, 4th State Representative, District 69. I live at 528 South College. You're welcome to come visit anytime. For 32 years, I've been active in civic affairs, most recently supporting citizen groups for strong public health, education, and business, and fair wages for all workers. Like so many of you, I'm alarmed about the direction of our state under current leadership. As your state representative, here are my priorities. 1, restore Kansas school funding, which has been stripped back to below 1992 levels. Our children's quality education is our #1 economic tool, providing the means to succeed. 2, fewer state special interest tax giveaways at the expense of raising local taxes. 3, respect seniors and the vulnerable among us. Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to start our questions from the media. We have with us tonight Ben Waring from the Salina Journal, Randy Picking from Eagle Media Center, and Todd Pittenger from the Salina Media Group. The first question will be from Todd Pittenger.
I've heard some campaign ads from both of you within the last couple of weeks. I've had too many questions I can count about those ads. So I'm going to start out asking about those. A two-pronged question. Gary, are you a deadbeat dad? JR, do you live in the district? Good question.
Good questions both. No, I am not a deadbeat dad. 32 years ago, an amicable divorce, joint custody, joint child support, agreed upon, not within the restraints of the court. 9 years later, a new development. I complied with the new development and the new rules. I love my children then, I love my children now, and you can refer to any one of them for a confident response from them.
Yes.
I think, Ben, I think the next question is yours.
State of Kansas is already more than $300 million behind budget estimates for the new fiscal year, which started in July 1. And I want to know what you think needs to be done to address the situation.
Yeah, that's a complicated situation that we find ourselves in. We do have a very large budget surplus currently. But as we start to project out into the future, and then also the estimations that are before us now, and it's important to understand what an estimation is. Basically, a group gets together and says, this is about how much we think is going to come in, and they use different economic indicators, and 3 people come together with differing opinions and kind of settle on a result. So missing someone's target that's sort of invented out there is, it's based on someone's guess. But it's also what our budget's based on. So if we have that guess and we're using that to base our budget on it, it's very difficult when those numbers don't come in as they should. Now, there are several things happening in the national economy that have caused some of those things, people moving their tax payments from this month to that month and those sorts of things that can be explained. But nevertheless, we're in the situation we find ourselves in now.
We have approximately a $16 billion budget. We have approximately $8 billion of indirect expenditures, which are various kinds of tax breaks, tax loopholes, tax credits. In my humble opinion, the first thing that Governor Brownback did was give a 100% tax break. All of a sudden, 200,000 businesses pay 0 income tax. Since education is about 70% of the state budget, that almost obligates Governor Brownback and his helpers to denigrate funding for education, because they're almost required to do that because it's 70% of the budget. So we have to freeze the tax giveaways to special interest at the cost of everybody else. There may be a few people in this room got it.
I'm going to go in a different direction here. Governor Brownback has formed a commission to study the recent increase in the number of earthquakes in Kansas that may or may not be related to fracking in the oil and gas industry. Has the governor taken the right steps to do this, or should something else be done, or should nothing be done at all?
I feel comfortable with the idea that Governor Brownback, instead of a personal ideological agenda, is sort of depending on science, perhaps. I think that's a good sign. There is hope for the Brownback administration. I'll put it this way. Good, I'm glad somebody said that. Louder, Gary! Still louder. All right. Should I get it closer? Is somebody shutting off my mic? Okay. Here we go. All right. Wow. Things have changed here. I was leaning further back. Anyway, put it this way. When we come to energy, source of energy, we left the Stone Age a long time ago with plenty of stones behind. We will be leaving the coal age and the oil age and going into renewable energy sources. I think it's good that he's at least investigating. I hope he's serious about it.
Well, I'm actually going to agree with Gary here for a second. This is going to be a first. I think that we do need to start investigating new sources of energy. Wind energy, we are the second windiest state in the nation, and it's not just because of the 2 of us up here. We are in a position to really benefit from these renewable sources of energy, and we need to continue to explore that. That doesn't mean we do it to the exclusion of other forms of energy. I think it is important that we continue to investigate ways to gain energy from the sources that we have at our disposal. Now they're less expensive, but there's certainly a lot to be said for becoming a wind state, a wind energy state, exporting that and benefiting from that, and the jobs that come with it that are frankly right up against the county line and have not crossed over to this date. But you know, there are some things in play there, but I do think that we need to continue to investigate that and start to bring those jobs here to Saline and Saline County.
Currently, same-sex marriage is not legal in Kansas, but a Supreme Court action, or rather inaction, earlier this week could ultimately lead to it becoming legal in Kansas. This leads to my question, though. If, as a state legislator, you were able to cast a vote on this issue, would you vote for or against same-sex marriage, and why would you vote that way?
Well, Todd, currently we have a constitutional amendment in our Constitution, and that's been voted on by the people of the state of Kansas, so I'll let that speak for itself. But I think it's first and foremost important to recognize that we should never make anyone feel ashamed to be who they are, and that when we're deciding things like laws and how they impact individuals, that we should keep that in mind. Sometimes decisions are made in haste that aren't the best decisions. I do believe that we need to be respectful of the First Amendment and religious liberties, while at the same time, on balance, not allowing the state to necessarily treat people dramatically differently, but again, respecting religion and religious beliefs of those institutions.
A district judge in Utah, which then includes the Kansas geography, passed that decision down. As I understand it, someone has to bring a lawsuit in the state of Kansas before that will then be completed, that issue. I personally, here's my position, I didn't like it when we had a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage. I was born heterosexual, enjoy being a heterosexual. Someone that was not born and enjoys my proclivities, I'm not going to castigate him. Here's what I really did not like at the state level. Passing a law, hiding bigotry, hiding discrimination in prayer, to me, is despicable.
Salina and the surrounding area have a significant and growing Hispanic population. What would you like to see the state do in regards, and I understand this is a federal issue, but what would you like to see the state do in regard to immigration?
Had a conversation with one of our county commissioners just last week over lunch, by the way, at the esteemed senior center where seniors are highly regarded and respected. We go there for a conversation, and we go there for information exchange. This county commissioner said there is a family of Mexicans who have been in this community for a long time. The children are well-behaved, well-mannered, well-educated. The father is in the process of being deported as we speak. And this commissioner, even though he's taken some heat over the last years, I think suggests that that action would be despicable, and I agree with him.
Well, in regards to immigration, you're right, Ben. It is a federal issue, and right now, what the federal government's doing is wrong, and they're putting that burden onto the states, and they're really putting us in a very difficult position where it's very expensive. We're taking on many of these kids, and they're being put into our schools, and they cost a lot of money at the local level, and those are expenses that they did not account for as those kids start being brought into Kansas. I think that we do need to do something at the state level about that and make sure that those schools are made whole for the burden that's being placed upon them for educating kids who, for the most part, don't speak the language, and that's difficult for them. I think, on the other hand, that also that there needs to be a tremendous amount of compassion for families, people who came here who have an expiration date on their stay. They have kids. Those kids are in our schools. It's important that we don't leave those kids as abandoned, essentially, when the federal government comes by and says that the parents need to go home.
Should the state of Kansas expand Medicaid?
Is that me? Oh, okay. I don't believe Medicaid expansion is the appropriate thing to do right now, and that's based upon many conversations with people in our disability community here in Salina. in addition to it being extremely expensive and something that we just simply cannot afford, it's also, it doesn't do anything for the people who are in the system now. Medicaid expansion will increase the amount of lines that those people are seeing to get access to services, and I don't want to see that happen. We need to get better at the services we're delivering now before we head into any sort of expansion, and that needs to be investigated fully before diving headfirst into something that's not only costly, but could potentially end up being a disservice to the people who are currently in our disability community waiting for services.
Yes, we need to expand Medicaid. The governor and his allies spent nearly $1 billion to get 3 private insurance companies to take charge. There have been benefits lost, customers lost, slow payment of claims. Since the inception of the governor refusing federal dollars, we have lost, in addition to spending $1 billion to privatize, we've lost nearly another $1 billion in federal revenue. And we absolutely, in my humble opinion, can't allow the same thing to happen to Medicare that happened to Medicaid. That would be a travesty.
Marijuana is legal in Colorado. It's also legal in Washington State. It being legal in Colorado has caused some problems here in Kansas with people transporting it here and there. Would you support the legalization of marijuana in Kansas, whether for medical use or recreational use, either, both, and why?
Yes, I would support that. I think we are already looking at Colorado to see how that's going. I certainly would support industrial hemp. My goodness, look at how that would stimulate the economy for farmers. They could buy perhaps some more John Deere tractors if they could have some more cash crops. I think the way Colorado is approaching it, if I had a medical situation, or if my opponent had a medical situation, or any of you, and if that were a treatment that would work, why would we not endorse that? Yes, I would be in favor of that.
As far as recreational use, absolutely not. I think that there are some forms of medical marijuana that would be acceptable. My uncle, as he was suffering from malignant melanoma, he had the benefit of that at the end of his life over in California, and it allowed him to be lucid for those last few days that we had the opportunity to spend with him. So having some personal experience with that, I think that there are some things that we can do within the confines of keeping it related to medicine and the practice of medicine and qualified doctors to make those decisions.
As you talk to the people in the 69th district, what are they telling you is the top issue that they're facing, and what would they like you to do about it?
As I go door to door, I am hearing a lot about taxation, and honestly, you still hear about Obamacare a lot. I know that's not necessarily a state issue, but it is talked about frequently. But people are getting a little tired of the constant property tax increases, and that's one of the reasons that I did vote in favor of almost 5 mil, 4.95 mil property tax cut for Salina taxpayers. That was part of the school finance bill and really provided some relief for folks here in Salina. So I think that's probably one of the biggest issues next to, again, Obamacare, which we don't necessarily deal with a lot at the state level. It's fun to talk about.
Walking in diverse neighborhoods in the 69th, having conversations, going to meetings, going to events. Here's the conversation, number one issue restore funding to education. Because people think at every level of education, pre-kindergarten, K through 12, workforce training, adult continuing education, education is the dynamo that generates the skills that turn our economy and keep the economy turning and going. And then talking about education, I find it very difficult that JR seems to he somehow thinks he generated more local money as a result.
Staying on the education topic, what about tenure for teachers?
I know several teachers. I know one teacher in particular. I'm going to use this as an example. By the way, I have been in the public school system. All my children graduated from the public school system and are all attending Regents universities at this point. And my grandchildren have all been also in the Salina Public Schools, and 2 of them are out in university. Repeat the question. Lost my train of thought.
Tenure for teachers.
Oh, yeah.
Your opinion.
One teacher particularly called my opponent and said, "How come you voted against tenure?" And my opponent responded over the phone, "I didn't vote against it." And my teacher person to whom I'm referring said, "Yes, you did. I've got it right in front of me. You voted, that was part of the school bill, and you voted against tenure." It's a bad idea to reduce funding to try to silence teachers, to try to slow down the education program, which in my opinion makes everything else operate.
Wow. I don't even know what to say to that. We have tenure here in Salina. The school finance bill was a huge win for Salina teachers, for educators, for taxpayers, for students, for parents. Not only did we have almost 5 mills in property tax cut, but we saw $2 million in the county going towards the classroom. We saw teacher raises of 4.2%. The statewide average was 2.4 from that bill, so Salina is a huge winner in that. And also, we were able to preserve about $800,000 for all-day kindergarten teachers. We're going to have all-day kindergarten here in Salina schools. That's a huge win for us. The property tax cut would pay for our bond issue that builds those classrooms twice over. We won on that. And again, we have tenure, so it's really difficult to have that be a linchpin decision maker when you're representing a group of people and you're keeping that. So I would say that that's a win-win, and that tenure somewhere else is not as important to me as what's happening right here in Salina.
There's a divide in Kansas, a divide in Topeka, Republican versus Democrat, moderate Republican versus conservative Republican. What could you do to reach out to the other side, so to speak, to get things accomplished, or do you even think it is important to try to reach out to the other side?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's very important to reach out and to get things done. I worked with Representative Julie McGinney just this last session to get the disability access tax credit that I introduced passed. We had a tough row to hoe to get that thing done, but I introduced that. It's a bill that allows for a tax credit for anyone who's making modifications to their home to increase accessibility. So if you have a mobility issue, generally someone who's disabled, you're able to make the modifications such as wheelchair ramps, expanding hallways, making bathrooms accessible, that sort of thing, completely tax-free. And we were able to get that put into, of all things, because Representative Julie McGinney does such a great job with it, a livestock bill, and got that to the governor's desk and passed. So that's important for Salina, it's important for Saline County, it's important for Kansans. Anyone with a disability issue who wants to stay in their home longer is now able to do so because they have that tax cut. And while it's not a huge sum of money, it is important to the people who take advantage of it.
a brief response back, if I may, on, according to my opponent, denigrating education does not somehow, stripping education and giving state tax giveaways to the wealthiest among us at the expense of local taxes doesn't add up, and here's why. In 70% of Kansas counties, there's been a 10% raise in local taxes. Now, can there be room for bipartisan effort? Absolutely. I will not go to Topeka with a personal agenda thinking that I can transform everyone to my way of thinking. I have no interest in that. It would be a dull, boring world if we all thought and acted and felt the same, but I sure am willing to collaborate and cooperate to have us go forward instead of continuing to move backwards.
This ends our time period set aside for the media panel. We thank the representatives from Salina Media Group, Eagle Broadcasting, and the Salina Journal. And so now we'll turn to questions from the audience. I believe it's Mr. Schwartzendruber's turn to start. And first question that on top of this stack, and we probably won't get to everything in this stack, but the first question relates to projected budget deficit within the coming term. If elected, how would you address the budget deficit?
I certainly would vote in favor of putting a freeze on 100% tax breaks, 200,000 businesses paying zero taxes, and then the higher wage earning, the higher income people in the community also getting lower taxes. We need to put a freeze on. We can't extend those tax breaks, which there is every intention to extend those tax breaks more. If the same team goes back, by the way, all state representative seats are up for re-election. If the same team goes back, we're gonna go deeper in the hole. And my opponent referred to the state legislative department. Quite some time ago, they predicted if we stay on the same path, instead of a $2.7 billion surplus by 2018, there will be a 2.7, all right, but it will be a deficit.
Mr. Clays.
Well, the tax breaks he's talking about are actually the tax breaks that are already in statute, and over the next 5 years they decrease rapidly. But the tax breaks he's talking about are actually the tax breaks for you. The tax breaks that exist in statute that decline are all for wage earners. They're the ones that are paid by wage earners. So those are the ones that are in statute that decline and that he would put a freeze on. The higher end tax breaks actually create jobs in the state of Kansas, so I don't know why anyone would want to decrease those. But as far as what I would do is I would expand our tax base. If you want to keep going in the direction that we were going 5 years ago, that direction is losing us a congressman in 10 years. The direction that we're turning our state into now is one with population growth, so that we're on a track to add congressmen, and our national influence goes up. So that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand that big picture, but it's certainly something that we're going to keep pushing for.
Earlier, we had a question on energy policy. What is your position on the renewable portfolio standards for our power companies?
Governor Brownback was all for that.
Oh, you can go ahead, that's fine.
Last thing I want to do is go out of turn
No,
and be
that's okay. We'll just
chastised.
switch, it's fine.
Okay.
Well,
I'll take
yeah,
my turn.
technically, first time answer this time should be Mr. Clays.
Okay, we'll let you go ahead.
All right, it's fine either way. I voted against repeal of the renewable portfolio standards the 3 times that it came up, and past votes are probably the best predictor of the future, so that's probably where I'll stand on, no, it's not probably, that is where I'll stand on that issue. I think that it's important that we continue to grow the wind energy industry here in the state of Kansas. I think it's important to incentivize job growth. It's important to incentivize new and emerging industries, and that includes things like the K-State Salina UAV program and things like that that come under attack constantly at the state level. We have bills that are introduced that would put an end to that program here at K-State, and that's something that I constantly have to fight to get shoved in a drawer. But those kind of industries, the things that are the next big thing, we do sometimes have to incentivize those things and get people going in the right direction on those things, because they aren't instantly something that's profitable. So I am in favor of continuing to encourage wind energy in the state of Kansas.
I commend you for your opinion on that, JR. Governor Brownback did support it in a pretty intense way, and then mysteriously came around the corner in the last month and a half and doesn't support it, and that was directly a result of the fast and furious special interest lobbying firms that lobbied him real hard. He knew it was a moneymaker. It is a good stimulus for the economy. It's good for the state. And the special interest people have swayed him back away from it, and it's too bad. And I think that will, a bipartisan effort can overcome that if we get some new representatives in the House in Topeka. And I would certainly be in favor of restoring that back to the process. We need more wind, not less. Again, Stone Age we left behind a long time ago. Plenty of rocks, plenty of stones left behind, and we will be moving forward with the renewables.
Okay, this question relates to a business that I know has been growing. I was exposed to it, the growth of it, in my role as a city planning commissioner a while back. And even though it's kind of a niche and it hasn't been in the news, it is an interesting question. I guess Mr. Schwartzendruber's turn to be first. Will you support continuing to require state licensure for cosmetology and tattooing, or will you follow suit with Kentucky and South Carolina, who no longer require such licensure?
Well, I'd love to refer that to somebody who has at least one tattoo, if not a whole bunch. It seems like a very dangerous thing to not have a licensure, and that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I tend to agree that any time that you're sticking a needle into somebody, that's probably something where you want to have some sort of level of oversight, and it makes sense to continue that.
Next question, and I guess we're back to Mr. Clays to start. How would you crack down on parents that do not pay child support?
Well, I think the current state law probably does a fairly good job of that. The one area that's a little nebulous, and I have a little bit of personal experience with this, is the area of self-employed folks, and there's not really an opportunity for wage garnishment there when you have people who go significantly into arrears. So that's probably an area where something could be done to kind of look into that and see if perhaps there's a way to be a little more aggressive with folks who are who are self-employed and who are a little more capable of avoiding the current enforcement that's available to us at the state level.
We sure don't want to penalize the most vulnerable among us by making damn sure they get drug tests when there are lots of people who are not so vulnerable who are misusing drugs a lot more, as in prescription drugs.
I don't know if I got that.
What did I miss?
How would you crack down on parents who do not pay child support, was the question.
Well, certainly wouldn't do it by doing drug testing. If they don't, if somebody that's not paying child support will be held accountable at some point. I was divorced 32 years ago, had an amicable divorce arrangement, joint child support, not having to be in the judicial part of the divorce. And like I said before, the rules changed 9 years after the divorce, and then I complied. So you need to hold people accountable who don't for various reasons. I agree, and I was held accountable and complied.
Open-ended answer here, or we got a timer on this?
Oh, okay.
At any rate, let us move on to a completely different subject. How would that be? The completely distant subject that came up from the audience is how can the state legislature help rural hospitals? And Mr. Schwarzenegger's turn.
Well, we can do that by expanding Medicaid. The rural hospitals we can't leave the federal dollars laying on the table, nearly $1 billion that we've lost. Medicaid is serving fewer people, being less effective than it was since it is now CannCare. And instead of going backwards, smaller hospitals are going to be extinguished, and even Salina Regional, if I'm not mistaken, no longer take one of the privatized companies to do business with them because they're so slow paying claims. So I think we need to expand Medicaid.
One of the things that we're doing right here in Salina is educating the next generation of doctors for Western Kansas. We have KU Med here in Salina that is now has a full enrollment, and I think they're just doing an amazing job over there. The collaboration between the hospital and the university and so many other stakeholders who have put so much effort into that to make KU Med Salina I think it's the nation's smallest four-year medical school, which is just absolutely amazing and so great for our community that we have something like that. As far as the Medicaid thing goes, you know, that it is terrible that we have a federal law like that is putting us in a position where we are now payers to the federal government, and that's something that I really have a lot of issue with, is the fact that we're now paying more dollars to the federal government than we're receiving back in services, and that is one of the biggest problems that we have with the Medicaid expansion issue. As far as, do I get 2 minutes now for this one, or?
They just beat. Okay. Okay, thank you. Here's a subject's been touched briefly in the news, but we all know that more than half of our rural counties have had very consistent declines in population. School districts are part of the affected agencies in this rural population decline, which brings up the question of school consolidations and what would be your approach to additional school consolidation?
And I think that's me, is that correct?
Yeah, I think.
Kansas State University Extension Service, quite some time ago, looked at a model and wound up consolidating districts. They used to have a county extension office, county extension agents in every county, and I'm not sure, it seems to me they have 12 districts at this point. I'm not suggesting that would be the number. I think that would be a model that ought to be studied and looked at, because we really are not, we're not only not in the Stone Age anymore, but we're not in the horse and buggy days either. We probably don't need so much, we probably don't need a government entity in every small geographical area. I would suggest looking at Kansas State University Extension Agent model.
There are certainly opportunities to consolidate administration and things like that across the state, or even here in Saline County, where it doesn't make sense necessarily to have 5 school districts touching the county. But I think as far as school consolidation, when you're talking about actual physical schools, that's just completely off the table.
This is a two-question question, and I think I'll go ahead and ask both of them. What specific bills will you support to improve education? And be Mr. Clay's turn.
Well, I think that we're going to have the second part of the Gannon decision come down, and I think it's important that as we start to approach that we recognize that that our education system here in the state of Kansas does need more dollars. What we do currently is we've stovepiped so many of those that, in the name of accountability, that we have a pile of dollars over here that's untouchable while we have teachers who don't get raises for years on end. And I personally think that's wrong. I ran 2 years ago on a platform of increasing teacher pay, and I still think that holds true today, that as we move forward, those dollars need to be pushed into the classrooms where they belong, where they're impacting the technology for the students and raises for the teachers, and making sure our teachers aren't put in a position of buying supplies themselves for these classrooms. That's not the way that those aren't the values we hold as Kansans. That's not something that we should continue to do, is allow a system where teachers feel that they have to go out and buy their own supplies because they're not being provided in the classroom by the schools.
The education funding has been over and over again visited and revisited, and folks, is back to below 1992 levels. We have to stop that. We have to quit that. The Gannon decision still is going to be in effect. They're not going to let that go. So my number one priority, as you recall, is restore full-funded education. I think that's the priority. I think we need to revisit the whole thing. And by the way, any raises that have come about have been because of the Gannon decision forcing the issue. Otherwise, we would have been back below, further than 1992 levels. So that's just got to be the number one priority. We have to take a bipartisan approach, whether Gannon gets to it quickly or whether the decision is made, just restore funding for education. That's got to be the priority.
Next question. What is your opinion about how judges are selected in Kansas?
To have a strong state, to have a strong country, we need the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. I think it's despicable to put a personal agenda suggesting that I, as governor, can handpick my judges so that I can avoid decisions like Gannon in the future.
I believe we voted to have the appeals court judges appointed by the governor through that system using the federal model rather than the current model that's used for, say, our district court judges, where they're 3 are put forward through basically the ABA, and I think that, or the KBA. I think that it takes some study of how that works before moving forward with something as important as our Supreme Court. So I don't think that's something that's going to be on the horizon. It requires a constitutional amendment, which requires that it goes to a vote of the people, which I think is the best place for a decision like that to be made, is with the people. And I think even then, it's a difficult thing to even consider having passed, and it's an expensive thing to endeavor. So it's not something that I'm pushing for.
Next question from the audience. CanCare's approach to developmentally disabled Kansans has changed. What approach do you favor? And be Mr. Clays first.
CanCare's approach to the developmentally disabled, I would have to study that issue. I'm not on that committee. But I think that CanCare as a whole is failing Kansans in many ways and does need to be improved. And it's going to require a lot of effort on the part of both parties coming together to decide what's in the best interest of Kansans and getting that done.
That I don't think you can argue, I don't think anybody can argue that CanCare, the way it has responded and the way it's going, has been good for the state of Kansas. I think no matter who is, no matter who is in the legislature and in the governorship, now we're ready for a change, and as I understand it, we need at least 5 new House representatives to support the Davis docking ticket when they become our governor and lieutenant governor. So I think it would happen automatically if they're in there, and I'm confident we'll get at least a half a dozen new House members. Now, CanCare needs to be revisited very, very quickly so that it stops denigrating the most vulnerable among us by cutting off services and dollars.
Okay, one more. Okay, this will be our last question from the audience. How will you work with the governor if he is of the opposite party?
Well, I'll remind him, years ago, Governor Brownback was here at the NAACP banquet, and he was not the first choice, but he said, probably you have not had a Republican here before. That's when he was still senator. And he said, what I'll tell you is, my experience has been Democrats perhaps are a little better at social justice, and perhaps Republicans are better at righteousness. But folks, tonight we're going to talk about social justice and righteousness all under the umbrella of God. I've never seen anyone turn around an audience faster than that. So I would remind, to this day, when I see the governor, and I have been known to go to Republican forums, I remind him of that caricature, and I think I would use that approach with him. We need a little spirituality, and we need a little righteousness to get things on track again.
I have great respect for Representative Paul Davis as a colleague. He is someone who is deserving of respect, and I would have no problem working with Governor Davis should that happen.
We are now at the closing comments. You each have 1 minute. And Gary, you're first.
The 69th District House race offers a clear choice. My opponent has been a loyal foot soldier for the Brownback agenda. I support putting an end to the experiment. As you've seen here tonight, we are on opposite ends of the big issues: education, tax policy, Medicaid. In closing, I'd like to return to education. The agenda of the governor and his allies to shrink the size of state government, I'll say again, requires them to reduce the footprint of public education, since education is approximately 70% of the state budget, the entire state budget. I take these cuts personally. All three of my children attended public schools and graduated from Regents institutions. My 8 grandchildren all attend Kansas public schools. Education is where my commitment will be as your state representative. I ask for your vote.
Thanks again to the League of Women Voters. You know, I was just teasing you about that, right? The Salina Chamber, Kansas Wesleyan University, and Access TV for taping tonight. Really appreciate everyone who came out this evening. I noticed the crowd getting bigger as we were talking. I want to believe that it's because you were waiting for our closing statements and you really just wanted to hear them, and it's not because Representative Huelskamp and Mr. Scherow are here tonight. But again, the crowd was great for those local debates, and I think that's great that we have so many people with such an interest in our county government and are looking forward to voting here on November 4th. I do ask for your vote November 4th. I would appreciate it. I think that my record is pretty clear over the past 2 years. It's a record of job growth and doing what's right for Salina and Saline County. Thank you.
Before we break up for the next session, we thank these candidates, but I would like to talk briefly about some unusual things on this year's ballot. As I said, copies of the ballot are available. The unusual thing is that there are 3 questions for nearly every voter in Saline County, and then there's a special question for the city of Salina. I'd like to review them quickly. There's a statewide question regarding the Kansas State Constitution, which currently bans certain lotteries. A raffle is a lottery and is currently illegal. A yes vote for that proposition would permit charitable raffles operated or conducted by religious, charitable, fraternal, educational, and veterans nonprofit organizations. A no vote on that proposition would continue the current prohibition against all raffles. In Saline County, all Saline County voters will get 2 ballot questions. The first one is, shall the Board of Saline County Commissioners change the number of county commission districts from 3 county commission districts to 5 county commission districts? A yes vote would require the present commission to redistrict the county into 5 districts of equal population and to establish an operating plan and proposed budget for the new commission to take effect early in 2015. The governor would appoint 2 new commissioners to serve terms until January 2017, when commissioners would be elected in the November 2016 election. And those new commissioners would take office. A no vote leaves the county commission at 3 members. The second ballot question for the entire county is to construct a new jail and court complex with a budget of $46.5 million to be financed with a 0.5% sales tax for 15 years. A yes vote approves the proposed construction and the sales tax. A no vote would end consideration of that particular proposal. In the city of Salina, voters will be asked to vote on a proposal to repeal the 1968 ordinance that authorizes fluoridation of water in the city's water system. A yes vote stops fluoridation. A no vote continues the city's present policy of adding fluoride to our water system. Additionally, there are a number of judges to be approved, yes or no. You can find those evaluations of all the state-level judges listed on the ballot at a website called kansasjudgereview.org. We urge everyone to familiarize themselves with the ballot before they enter the voting booth. And one good way to do that is to do advanced balloting, which begins October 15th. Voter registration closes October 14th. So if you need to change your address or if you're a new voter, be sure and get down this week and register to vote. And remember, the official election day is November 4th. This time we'll take a break till 8:10, at which time we will proceed with a forum concerning the 1st Congressional District of Kansas for the U.S. Congress.
Welcome for our 3rd segment tonight. Again, my name is Dale Heisel. I'm chairman of the board of the Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, the League of Women Voters, and the Chamber of Commerce. And also, I'd like to thank Kansas Wesleyan for being our host. Again, as mentioned earlier, we do have profiles of each of the candidates at the entryway if you have not picked one up. This segment is the 1st Congressional District race, and we have Tim Huelskamp and James Chereau with us tonight. And I'm going to turn the program over again to Abner Perney, president of the Salina League of Women Voters, to go through the format and the rules.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale. On behalf of the members of the Salina League of Women Voters, we welcome you to this important public service event. This forum is being recorded and broadcast live by Access TV of Salina, and it's also being recorded by KOOD, Smoky Hills Public Television of Bunker Hill, for broadcast 1 or more times before the election day, which is November 4th. This time I want to direct your attention to the front row. At the center are timekeepers, longtime league members Carmen Wilson and Diana Tarver. One will check the time while the other will hold up a red sign to let candidates know it's time to stop talking, and there will be a bell. To the right is the question, did you hear that bell? To the right is the question screening committee made up of league members Ann Zimmerman, Sue Holmes, Carol Vire, and Salina Chamber President Dennis Lauver. So let's see, Don Weiser of the Salina Chamber and David Norland of the Salina League made the arrangements for this evening. Mr. Weiser compiled the Chamber's profiles, and Lori Trow of the Salina League compiled the voters' guides, which are written responses to questions sent out to all the candidates. It includes contests that we're not covering live tonight. Those are available at tables at both entrances here on this end of the auditorium. They can also be found later online at the Chamber website at salinakansas.org or at the League website, lwvsalina.org. Pads and pencils are provided for the audience members to write down questions for candidates. League members will collect those questions and take them to the screeners. Please hold up your hand if you need to get their attention to turn in a question that hasn't yet been turned in. Here are the basic rules of the forum. Each candidate has 1 minute for an opening presentation, then 1 minute to answer each question, and then a closing remark of 1 minute. We ask that everyone pay attention to the timekeeper. The order of answering questions will be alternated, so each candidate will have the opportunity to be first to answer. All questions will either come from the audience in written format, which I will then read, and the media panel. We specifically ask the audience to write your questions so that they are not directed at one specific candidate. Make them issue-oriented, relating to the philosophy and direction that the candidates would want to go, and general enough so that each candidate can respond. Questions directed toward one candidate will be eliminated by the screening committee. We also ask the audience to be respectful, to not call out. A little bit of applause when you're moved will be fine. We will ask as many questions as time allows. We're allowing around 30 minutes for both media questions and for audience questions. We hope that you understand that if your question is not used or is reworded, that's just what we've tried to do to keep from being redundant and to keep the questions of general interest. At this time, it's time for opening remarks. And so Mr. Huelskamp is first. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and it is truly a pleasure to be with you this evening. My name is Tim Huelskamp. I've had the pleasure and opportunity to serve as your member of Congress for a little over 3 years, and I tell you, for a young man growing up in the little town of Fowler, Kansas, as a fifth-generation farmer, it truly is an amazing honor to think here in America that I would have a chance to serve you in Washington. I want to introduce my wife. She's here tonight. Some of our kids would be here, but they had apparently homework to complete as well. But I'm sure we're going to have some great questions. But my hope is tonight that we focus on really big issues, because when I talk to Kansans, they're concerned about the future of our country. They're concerned about the future in Washington, D.C., and they're looking for some real solutions. So again, thank you for having me today for our debate.
And Mr. Scherow, thank you.
Yes, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Chamber, and our moderators and the audience for being here this evening. My name is Jim Scherow, and I'm running for Congress in the 1st District. I'm a fourth-generation Kansas Air Force veteran and an educator at Kansas State University. As you listen to the forum tonight, I want you to focus on who is offering you solutions to the problems facing Kansas. I'll be an advocate for Kansas first. My opponent, Tim Huelskamp, has been in Congress now for several years and has accomplished little. During this term, he's made 39 attempts at legislation, passing none. You'll hear him blame Obama, but you won't hear him apologize for threatening business owners, and you won't hear him acknowledge his failures. His aggressive posturing has landed him in front of TV cameras and has gotten him kicked off the Agriculture Committee. What Tim Huelskamp can't do is offer you solutions, because even his own party has stopped listening to him. I look forward to the exchange tonight and what we would do if elected, and who will bring respect, responsibility, and results back to politics in the big first.
We're now going to move into our media segment. We have with us tonight Ben Waring from the Salina Journal, Randy Picking from Eagle Broadcasting, Todd Pittenger from Salina Media Group. And the first question will come from Ben Waring.
Congressman, you mentioned the big issues you'd hope to get discussed tonight. So what are the people of the Big First telling you are the big issues that they want addressed?
If I understand the rules, that question would go first to Mr. Sherrill. Is that correct?
Correct.
When I've traveled the district, the thing that comes up over and over again, why can't Congress get anything done? What is causing the divisiveness in Congress? And what people point to over and over again is that my opponent has been one of the chief causes for this divisiveness. Even his own political leadership, his own party leadership in Congress has gotten along with him so poorly that he has been removed from agriculture and budget. Agriculture is incredibly important to this district. It has the third largest agricultural economy of any congressional district in the nation, first in wheat production, first in livestock production, and we're left without a voice. This is what I hear over and over again. We need somebody who will go to work for solutions in Congress, and that's what I'll do as a practical-minded politician.
In the last 3 years, I've conducted over 250 town halls, and I tell you, Kansans are concerned, Ben. They're worried about their future. They're worried about jobs. They're worried about their health care. They're worried about $17 trillion of debt. They're worried about insecurity nationally and at the border. And they're looking for those solutions. So number one, they say, hey, we've got to do something about an out-of-control Washington that's added $7 trillion of debt since this president took office. They're worried about an out-of-control regulatory agencies that infringe on small businesses and hurt our jobs. And they're looking for economic and health care certainty. And Obamacare has cost thousands of Kansans a health care plan they liked. And we passed numerous solutions through the House. And actually, I've had 30 specific legislative initiatives that have been signed into law by this president. So we are making a difference, particularly for our veterans.
Currently, the United States is involved in military airstrikes in Syria and Iraq, and recently some troops from Fort Riley have been deployed or the process of being deployed to the Middle East. Do you think the president needs to seek approval from Congress to maintain the current level of involvement or expand use of military force?
I relish the opportunity to see an actual strategy or plan from this president to deal with ISIS. And tomorrow I will participate in a deployment ceremony from Fort Riley. And these are not small issues, ladies and gentlemen. Folks are putting their lives on the line. And as I understand it, Randy, we have no clear strategy to deal with ISIS. You know, just a few months ago, the president was calling these folks the JV. They're beheading children. They are serious about reestablishing a caliphate. And I hope when we return in November, the president and our Republican and Democrat leadership will come together and debate an authorization force, because I think that's necessary. And we owe it to the troops at Fort Riley to make it clear what our strategy is for success, as well as our exit strategy. We've spent literally hundreds of billions of dollars, and thousands of men and women have died. I think it's unclear where we head in the future. And I expect to hear the same thing from the troops and their families tomorrow.
If you agree with me that ISIL is a barbaric terrorist organization intent on destroying our way of life, then we must use our power to stop them. When I served as a city commissioner, I had the honor of getting to know General William Mayville and his wife Shan. They're remarkable people. And he now is in charge of the operations in Afghanistan and, Iraq and Syria. And I have ultimate confidence in his ability to perform his mission. And when I was in the Air Force 40 years ago, I understood that one of the prime things for me was not to abandon my post. But when America needed you, Mr. Huelskamp, you left Washington and abandoned her.
I guess maybe I'll kind of stick with this same military theme to start with. I want to talk about unmanned aerial vehicles, or as they're commonly called, drones. When I use the term drone around here, people usually get on me and tell me, no, it's a UAV. At any rate, UAV, drone, whatever it's called, the Federal Aviation Administration on a case-by-case basis, just regulates them for public and research use by law enforcement agencies and universities. But last year, they've got a roadmap that they may become more widespread for public use as well. What are your thoughts on the use of unmanned aerial vehicles or drones by the public?
Well, Todd, as a fifth-generation farmer, pretty clearly in my industry, they have a tremendous amount of uses. They're already currently being used. I've been working as closely as I can with the administration, FAA, to provide opportunities. I think there's a real economic growth opportunity working with the universities and the private sector here in Kansas. Just right here in this community, I visited the K-State Salina campus and looked at their program. There's tremendous growth opportunities, and the FAA needs to be very clear they don't restrict and impinge the economic growth opportunities of the use of drones and other opportunities throughout the economy. So it's something that can create jobs if FAA will let us continue to grow an industry that, in many cases, did start with some entrepreneurs right here in the state of Kansas. So I look forward to opportunities to grow that in the future and to make certain that we have proper regulations. We actually did provide something in appropriations bills, I think a year and a half ago, that would set the stage for some tremendous growth in this arena and create Kansas jobs.
Drones have tremendous economic potential. There's no question about it. I've seen their use in Manhattan for aerial photography of the city and know how that benefits city planning. So there's no question in my mind that they should be used. What concerns me about drones is their use also for lethal purposes, and especially when they're deployed in military ways. And to think about drones being used to actually target Americans, I think, is an irresponsible use of military power in drones. And so while they have the potential for great benefit, they also have the potential for great harm. And so we need to take a close look and make sure that the benefits certainly outweigh any harm that can come to Americans through the use of drones.
In the last couple of days, same-sex marriage has been on the news again, with the Supreme Court declining to hear cases. Was the court's decision not to take up this issue right now the right one? And what is your position on same-sex marriage?
I guess I start that one. Yes. I believe in equal rights for all Americans, all, and equal protection for all Americans under the law. I don't make it my business to obsess about what is going on in anybody's bedroom or what their relations are. I know what my students think at K-State, and this is not an issue that concerns them. They already know how they feel about this. They're more concerned about jobs and paying off their student loans. That's what they're concerned about. And if elected, I will keep Congress out of our marriages.
Ben, that's a very good question, and I didn't quite hear the answer from my opponent. I guess he has no position, but the Supreme Court in the Windsor decision in June of last year very specifically said the states would be able to regulate issues of marriage. And the failure of 4 members of the Supreme Court to actually continue to uphold that and actually take up some cases suggests that maybe they aren't going to stick by that decision. That Section 2 of the Defense of Marriage Act that was signed into law by Bill Clinton, voted for by Joe Biden, has been upheld by the Supreme Court. And my hope is in the future the Supreme Court of the United States will actually be consistent in the rulings, and I am a strong supporter of defending traditional marriage. And the voters of Kansas had their say. They said, we support traditional marriage. Now, my opponent disagrees with the voters of Kansas. I get that. But in 2005, they very, very clearly spoke, and I don't think any unelected judges, 1, 2, or 3, or 9, should take away the right to vote of Kansas citizens on such a critical issue as marriage and families.
I would just like to comment real quickly.
You're out of time. You're out of time,
Okay.
Jim.
All right.
Yeah, we don't do,
Okay.
this is
Okay.
not a debate, we don't do rebuttals. This
All
is a
right.
forum, we take turns.
Okay.
The Affordable Care Act is now open for its second enrollment period. You hear both sides, it's great, it stinks. Your opinions of the Affordable Care Act after its first year?
Randy, I think it's been an absolute disaster, and I had an opportunity to sit down with the Kansas Hospital Association just yesterday talking about the folks that actually are receiving coverage under Obamacare and the folks that can't make the $5,000 deductible. We have more folks today that can't make their deductible or on problems paying their bill than before. I heard that from the hospitals yesterday. But the question is, what do you replace it with? But before I get to that, let's be absolutely crucial and clear about that. If you support Obamacare, you support massive cuts to Medicare, Randy. 716 cuts. Yeah. Hope my time doesn't get taken away. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens in Washington far too long. People can't have honest debates. According to the Congressional Budget Office, you're proving our point.
Please let him have his point, please.
According to the Congressional Budget Office, $716 billion in cuts to Medicare that will cripple our rural hospitals. That's the fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen. And it also has caused thousands of Kansans to lose the health care plan they like, contrary to the promise of the President of the United States.
The ACA certainly has its shortcomings, but it has provided important benefits to all Americans. If you're on your family's, if you're a youth and on your family's insurance, you can stay on it until you're 26. You will not be denied coverage for pre-existing conditions. 11 million Americans now have insurance who didn't have insurance before. The donut hole for prescription drugs for Medicare recipients is being closed. Now, I know the problem with employer mandate, and I know that that needs to be fixed. It's not right. But to get to that, you have to be able to work together with others. And 50 times trying to repeal it has gotten nothing accomplished except to waste Congress's time and our tax dollars. While there has been the $760 million taken out of Medicare, not one benefit that a Medicare recipient is receiving is being taken away from her or him as a result of that reduction.
In recent months, thousands of illegal immigrants, many of them children, have poured across the border into the United States. I've got a two-pronged question. What do we do with these immigrants who are already here? And looking at the broader picture, what do we do about the immigration issue as a whole?
Okay. First thing we must do is secure our borders. And also, amnesty is not the answer either. We must work together to bring about immigration reform that accomplishes what a great many business people, especially in the southwest portion of Kansas, want. When I was with the Hugoton Chamber of Commerce, they want to see immigration reform so as to make the workforce there legal. They know what immigration has done for that area in bringing about economic prosperity, job growth, businesses created. Now, if elected, I will support bipartisan efforts to reform our immigration policies. They're broken, there's no doubt about that. But there is a bipartisan immigration bill on the floor of the House right now that the Senate passed that's not being dealt with. That, not putting that to a vote, is what's the problem. There's been solutions proposed, and we can put those into effect with bipartisan cooperation.
There were two parts to that, the question, Todd. First, the bill that is in a House committee that did pass the Senate. Very clearly, it does provide amnesty, and that is something that's overwhelmingly opposed by Kansans. But I'll tell you, my perspective on immigration is a little different. I've actually been through the process with 2 young children. But I tell you, the immigration system is broke. It needs to be fixed. With the idea that we do that only before we secure the border. is what concerns me. We got to secure the border first. In my opinion, the Senate bill does not secure the border, but what does begin to secure the border and address the issue that was caused by the president's amnesty order on June of 2012 that led to 70,000 young illegals coming across the border is we got to repeal that amnesty bill and provide resources to border states and ask the administration to start doing its job. Currently, it's a requirement. You secure the border. That's the president's job. And we've had a multitude of presidents of both parties that have failed to do that job.
Governor Brownback has started a conversation about saving the Ogallala Aquifer in western Kansas and water use in Kansas in general. Speak about that effort and what you see as some good steps toward that.
Yeah, Ben, I think we need to have that conversation, and we need to discuss the future because it's so critically important, particularly to the big first district, what happens with our Ogallala Aquifer. I will say, when I served in the state legislature, I was leader in the efforts to allow folks to have an incentive to conserve water through water banking, a very specific concept. I wrote that bill. But until we had a governor that was willing to push and sign folks up for that, it wasn't used much. But since the governor came to office, the legislature and the governor did eliminate the use it or lose it philosophy, which encouraged overuse and discouraged conservation. Those are the kind of things that I think the 50-year plan should include and provide those incentives for conservation. And we've had some bad policies for decades that slowly we're changing, or I see changing in Topeka today.
One more media question, please.
Oh,
I
thought I would.
too soon, I'm sorry.
That's okay. The hydrologists at Kansas State University indicate that we only have about 40 years to make some significant changes in the way agriculture is practiced in western Kansas. Given the rapid depletion of the Ogallala Aquifer, it's already occurred significantly around Scott County to the point where several farmers now can no longer irrigate. It's causing water shortages in Russell and Hayes, and leading them to think about different ways of bringing in domestic water supply. It's an issue that is right here in front of us, and it needs to be addressed. Only one water district, groundwater management district, number 4, has even attempted to do anything yet. So we need to bring together business people, farmers, scientists, politicians, everyone who has an interest and a future in this state to start thinking about how to address conservation, but also how to bring about a new form of agriculture that doesn't rely so heavily on the Ogallala, that still creates prosperity and jobs in Kansas.
I'm sorry, but sorry for the confusion, but please, one more media question.
Well, I'd be willing to listen to the great questions from the audience. If you'd like to go ahead, please start.
Okay. If we've exhausted the media, and that's so unusual.
Yeah,
They look pretty tired.
Yeah. Some of them have been doing talk radio since yesterday, so that could be the problem. Okay, so audience questions, a wide variety of questions here. First one is, what committee will you request or would you most like to serve on in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, for me, that is so easy. Of course, I can't demand what committee I will be on if elected. That's up to the party leadership. But I would think that there might be an opening on the Agriculture Committee for me should I get elected.
You have to get permission of Nancy Pelosi, though, Jim.
Pardon? Yeah, that's my answer.
Mr. Yuleskamp.
Yeah, I am currently serving on the Small Business Committee, and I think that's very critical because in Kansas, our jobs are created by small businesses, generally. And being an advocate for small business sometimes can be a lonely task in a town controlled by special interests in many cases. I also serve on the Veterans Committee, and we passed probably the single biggest reform to the VA in decades. I think it's going to help veterans in our rural areas. But I will request to get back on the Ag Committee because I think it's important as a fifth-generation farmer. And it's not that I studied ag in school, I did, but as only one of 12 farmers, I think what is going to happen, and we're hearing it from folks in Washington, that the idea that you're going to punish someone because of the way they vote, which is what happened to me, that's That's not the way Washington should work. And Jim here will have to have permission from Nancy Pelosi to get on whatever committee. He understands that. And I will be working with our Republican leadership to say, if you want good ag policy, you got to have a farmer on the ag committee.
Okay. What can be done to reverse the increasing gap between rich and poor in the U.S.? And I think Mr. Huelskamp is up first.
In the last 6 years, I think we've had clearly, and as the president said, his policies are on the ballot this fall, we clearly have gone the wrong way. We've had 6 years of policies in which that gap has widened. I would argue it's because of the president's policies. And as we sit here today, he had 6 years to try these. He's been president for 6 years. And as we sit here today, there are 22.7 million Americans looking for a full-time job. A full-time job. And they aren't able to do that because of bad policies coming out of this administration, coming out of too many regulations. But what I hear specifically are questions about regulation, over-regulation, restricting the abilities of farmers and ranchers and small businessmen and women, worried about high taxes, worried about mandates from Obamacare, worried about mandates from Fish and Wildlife Service, worried about mandates from folks in Washington that have no clue what's going on in Johnson, Kansas, for example, or Salina for that matter. We need to produce more jobs here in this state, and we can do that with policy changes.
There's definitely a problem in America right now, especially with the way our economy is working. It doesn't work well for the middle class at all. I'm part of that middle class. I haven't seen my taxes going down, they're going up. I've also seen in my community poverty rates going up. There's an income gap, and there's an unfairness in the way in which certain people in our nation benefit at the expense of others. Outsourcing jobs, I don't get that. And I don't understand why that in the world should be a tax deduction for a corporation as a business expense. We're talking about keeping American jobs here. And part of that is creating the kind of industry that will keep jobs here, like wind power and ethanol production in this state. Those jobs can't be outsourced, and they will contribute to the prosperity of the nation and this state.
Related question, what should be the federal minimum wage, starting with Mr. Sherrill?
No, even a federal minimum wage of $10.10 doesn't really lift a family of four out of poverty. There was a statistic once that I read that if McDonald's workers were paid $15 an hour, it would raise the cost of a Big Mac by 25 cents. Now, how many of us could not afford 25 cents? You know, when corporations are making record profits, I do mean record profits, and the rest of us are stagnated in our middle class earnings, something is wrong about who controls what's going on in our economy. And I say it's time for working men and women to be paid a decent wage for a decent day's work.
And let me, if I could ask Abner,
Yes,
am
sir.
I permitted to give my time to my opponent if he would agree to answer the question?
Was that not an answer?
Okay.
No. But
Okay,
you
well,
may
the question
comment-
wasn't answered. It was, what should be the federal minimum wage?
Minimum wage. What
And I
should-
never did hear that.
Well, yeah.
But you know what? If we want to create more jobs here in Kansas, talk to small business men and women across the line. Just sit down and talk to them and say, what would it take for you to create more jobs? More regulations? More mandates under Obamacare? A higher minimum wage, would that create more jobs? Actually, the administration's actual figures said that will cost 500,000 jobs to go to the $10.10 level. That's their figure, because it will force people that make something below the 7 and 10 that are not worthy enough in the job market, they lose jobs. We need to work at encouraging entrepreneurs to create more jobs. not letting government come in and try to determine. Of course, no one could live. I disagree with my opponent. No one can live on 10 an hour. Why not 20? Why not 30? Washington can't dictate that. You don't want Washington picking winners and losers. That's what I've been trying to change. And because it is the very wealthy in both parties do have tremendous access.
From the audience, next question. What approach will you take toward future federal budget impasses? And it's Mr. Huelskamp's turn.
Well, as we've seen particularly in the last 6 years, and that's the number I'd like to use tonight, there's been $7.2 trillion added to the federal debt since this president took office. It has not gone down. The deficit this year is going to be was $506 billion. That's unsustainable. Now, if you want somebody that wants to spend money and raise your taxes, I'm not your guy. I am not your guy. But if you want someone that's going to go through every item of the budget and determine, is this program really working for the American people? Can we afford to burden our children and grandchildren with another program? That's the shocker here. And I'm looking around the room. It's none of you that's going to pay this off. It's our children and grandchildren. We've had successive generations of politicians that say we can spend more money and somehow we're going to fix the problem with more spending and more taxing. That's not worked. We need to put us on a path to balance. We need to pass a balanced budget amendment and put us on a path to balance in 10 years. We have to do that for the future of our children and grandchildren.
There is no question about it, there's a problem with the debt. And all economists, left or right, agree that in 20 years, if we don't do something about it now, get serious about it, then it's going to really implode the American economy. So there are two approaches that could really help besides simply cut taxes and cut spending. Two approaches. Common sense reductions in federal spending need to put an end to tax cheating. I mean, let's start someplace just really close, like Congress. I mean, why in the world do we need to have Congress paying for boosting Facebook likes? And that's costing taxpayers $750,000 a year. Let's close tax loopholes on corporations and overseas job outsourcing. And tax cheaters like President Reagan did. He took them to court and imprisoned them. That's where they belong. So Huelskamp's support of cuts spending taxes has failed miserably here in Kansas, and I don't want to see that spread nationally.
Okay. I think this is really a follow-up to a media question, but is hemp and cannabis a priority federal issue, and what do you think is the right federal position on these issues?
On which issue? I'm sorry.
The production or legalization of industrial hemp and the legalization of cannabis or marijuana as a legalized drug in the U.S. Is it a priority federal issue, and what do you think is the right federal position on this issue?
Okay, there seems to be several components to that question. First of all, I think it's primarily a state issue. States have been taking care of this. We see them taking a variety of approaches from Colorado and Washington to Pennsylvania. So leave that as a state issue, whether or not to legalize. And growing industrial hemp, I mean, Kansas was one of the main growers of industrial hemp during World War II. It was a significant support to the war effort at that time, especially in rope, but it has a lot of other uses as well. And the federal government can declassify marijuana to the point where it can be studied for its medicinal uses. There are several already that are being proven, especially in treating people who suffer from serious reoccurring seizures. So let's use some common sense about how we do this and end the sort of prohibition era policies that we have pursued with cannabis and industrial hemp.
That is interesting enough. A question I do hear throughout central and western Kansas. Kansans warning about the opportunities for that. And In the most recently passed farm/food stamp bill, there was a provision in there that I did support that would allow the growing of industrial hemp, at least the research of that, and continue to move forward on what might be an opportunity for rural communities across Kansas, and particularly in Kansas agriculture. And so that's something that we're looking at on the issue of legalization of marijuana. One thing that I think we need to see is better national research coming out of the agencies that regulate that, the FDA. I think they've not done a good job of researching that and looking at the opportunities therein. But so far we haven't seen that coming out, and it's something that I think we should look at what opportunities are there, what it means for Kansans, and we have an opportunity actually to look at the social impact and experiment just to our west, and that really is showing up in parts of western Kansas and not having a good social impact.
What policies would you support to help control prescription drug costs?
As far as controlling prescription drug costs, I think the best way to deal with growing healthcare costs is going in an opposite direction that Congress and the President did with Affordable Care Act. And that's put Kansans in charge of their healthcare. Not a government bureaucrat, not a big insurance company, but let Kansans make those choices. Under Obamacare, if you got the card, you might be lucky enough to receive care. It just depends. You might not be able to pay for the deductible. You may not be able to pay for the premium. You might have lost coverage you'd like. But we think we need a wholesale change. The idea that somebody in the White House or somebody in Congress or somebody in the agencies going to give you health care for free, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And we've got to look at options that put Kansans, consumers, in charge of their health care again, rather than a government bureaucrat or insurance company. And that would apply across the board in health care. And we need to look at some pretty innovative programs to do that across the country.
When I've talked to my pharmacist in Manhattan about why in the world is this prescription drug going up again? Whenever is it going to become generic? He says, well, Jim, it just goes back to the federal agencies controlling this, it extends the patent for another 5 years, and it goes up 5% every year. I go, man, that's great. I wish I could be in that kind of business. And then, so part of the problem is the role of lobbying in Congress and the power that pharmaceutical companies have. I mean, to me, this has just gotten completely out of control. We are the only industrial nation in the world that does not negotiate with pharmaceuticals for drug control costs. Canada does, Germany does, England does. We don't. You can go to Canada, buy the same prescription for a lot less than you can here in the United States, and that's the reason why, because the pharmaceutical companies and their lobbyists have a stranglehold on our Congress, but they don't have one on me.
Okay. Totally different subject. What is the right 50-year energy plan for America? Mr. Shrose first.
50 years. We need to stress that out farther. We need to reduce global CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. That means reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are going to play an important role in the economy of Kansas and the nation for quite some time. But we need to invest in alternative energy production that will lower that. Natural gas is part of this, but so is biofuels, so is wind energy, so is solar production. All of these need to be put into play to help. Other countries are far in the lead on this. Germany is, Canada is. We need to step up our game, because not only does it improve the global climate situation that we're all facing, but it also creates jobs here in Kansas.
Very clearly, the professor does support the president's global warming agenda, which would involve less use of coal, less use of natural gas, less use of oil products, and would cost thousands and thousands and thousands of Kansas jobs. Natural gas is produced in this state, plenty of oil as well. And if we could build a pipeline called Keystone, we could actually create more Kansas jobs.
It already spilled it. Wait a minute.
I would encourage folks to drive to McPherson, see what happens when you have a vibrant energy sector in one community. Hundreds of new jobs are being created, great paying jobs, that if the president has his way, will go away because of his global warming agenda. We have an opportunity, a tremendous opportunity for energy growth in this state, probably an opportunity of a lifetime. And we cannot waste it by attacking fossil fuels. I just saw Senator Manchin, a Democrat, talking about the president's war on coal. That must stop, Mr. President. And Professor, I wish you would help us defend Kansas energy industries.
Well, this looks like a follow-up question. What are your thoughts on fracking and the federal control, if any, of it, starting with Mr. Huelskamp?
Mr. Obama, stay out of Kansas on that issue. Leave us alone. Fracking was invented in Kansas in 1957. The first hydraulic fracturing job was in Hugoton, Kansas. And there is no documented problem ever. Now, if you want to cost, again, thousands of Kansas jobs, invite the EPA into the state of Kansas. Invite the president to try to pass his global warming agenda, which, by the way, the U.S. House and Senate, even under Democrat control, rejected that in 2010. Again, we have a tremendous opportunity. And I'm looking around the audience again, a lot of retired folks that may not care about jobs. But I'm worried about young folks that are looking for opportunities in the state of Kansas. And there are tremendous opportunities in the energy sector unless we pass the president's global warming agenda.
Mr. Schroe.
You know, if fracking was to be proven to be completely safe and reliable, I would have no problems with it. But it seems to me that it's somewhat amazing that some people can turn on their water at home and they can light it on fire, and they never could before fracking was done in their area. It's also amazing to me, if you go to Harper, Kansas, the number of earthquakes that have been occurring that have never occurred there before, shaking pictures off of the walls. These are issues that geologists are determining whether or not there is real legitimacy to this. I'll be very interested in hearing what the geologists, what scientists have to say, which is why also I'm very concerned about global climate change, because Representative Huelskamp, the science is in. Human beings are a contributing cause of global climate change. If we don't do something about it, future generations, my daughters, their children, are going to pay a heavy price for our inaction.
Okay. Audience, thank you. We have about 4 minutes left, and I have at least one other question, maybe a couple others of general interest, I trust. Everybody has an intergalactic communicator in their pocket, almost these days. So, candidates, what is your stance on maintaining net neutrality? Internet neutrality is the question, and it is under fire. I understand there are movements afoot to allow internet service to be put into tiers of service and to run up the costs that way and to make it less free and less accessible than it is. Leaving it as it has been is what's called net neutrality. That's my understanding of the issue. So what is your understanding of the issue?
Well, your description of it is pretty good as far as I'm concerned. I support net neutrality. I mean, look at the tremendous exchange of information and communication that we have today as a result of that. And the people who will be served the worst for this are the people who are living in the remoter areas of our nation. And that would be the western part of Kansas. I don't want to see Western Kansas punished under some sort of profiteering motive for making it more difficult to access the internet.
I do not support the efforts underway in Washington and in many corners of the administration that would allow them to control the internet. I think it's of entrepreneurs and innovation, and we don't want to change that. But what I do worry about, I thought the question maybe was going to that, is I've been a leader trying to stop federal agencies with acronyms like the NSA from tapping into your phone lines, tapping into your emails, looking at your communications. That must stop. We should protect our individual liberties. We shouldn't be turning them over to any administration. And when you have the head of the National Security Agency lie to the American people and say, no, we're not looking at your emails, you know you've got a problem. And I'll just say, I've been working together with Republicans and Democrats alike, and we actually got something done. It passed it by 220 votes. Barely got it passed. That told not only Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, but John Boehner, the President of the United States, is leave our phones alone.
And our final audience question: is there an example where you are willing to compromise with others in order to pass legislation?
The single biggest legislative accomplishment of my last term in Congress, I believe, was the passage of a VA reform bill. And that was tough. That was tough because the VA, the bureaucracy, 320,000 of them, many of them very good folks, but they're folks at the top, mid-level managers that didn't want to make changes. And as we saw in the horrific scandals out of Phoenix and across the country, there are 91 ongoing criminal investigations. And I've been right at the middle of those trying to unearth the truth and make sure our veterans got care. And for a while, both parties were fighting over whether this should be a partisan issue. But at the end of the day, in that committee, we were able to pull together many folks, and it passed almost nearly unanimously, would allow veterans in this area and other areas better access to care closer to home that I think will help their families as well. It's what our veterans deserve, and I think that was the single biggest way that we can compromise and come together. But we had to change a bureaucracy that had been doing it the same way for 30 years. I think that's an accomplishment.
One of the areas where certainly I think compromise was of great benefit for the farmers and the nation was the agriculture bill that my opponent did not vote for. It did not please anybody. It did not please people who wanted deeper cuts into food stamps. It didn't please people who wanted deeper cuts into farm subsidies and income and farmer insurance. So it was a compromise bill all the way around, but yet what came out of that was important for maintaining farming in this state and in the nation, and I would have been there voting for that bill. It's one thing to embrace and support your conservative principles, but Robert Dole, the great Kansas senator, did the same thing, but he always managed to put Kansas farmers first.
We've come to the end of our questions, and now we'll start our 1-minute closing statement by our candidates. And Mr. Schroe, I think you are first.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everyone who has attended tonight's forum, and a special thanks goes to the League of Women Voters and the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. If nothing else has come out of tonight's forum, it should be obvious that my opponent and I differ considerably on many of the issues and how to represent the interests in the Big First. My opponent, I believe, has demonstrated a failed politics. I have a proven track record of working with others to bring about concrete results in Manhattan, making it the fastest growing city in the state. I know that I can bring about similar results for the Big First. During a congressional hearing, my opponents once said to a VA employee, when a bureaucrat fails at their job, they should be fired. No excuses allowed for failing veterans anymore. Well, the same holds true for a congressman. When a congressman fails at their job, they should be fired. No excuses allowed for failing the Big First. I thank you, and I ask you for your vote on November 4th.
Abner, if I might double check, what's the time for final statement?
Just 1 minute,
Okay,
sir.
he went well over, and I didn't see that from the.
He barely seconds. He was within
Thank
10
you.
seconds.
It's been a pleasure to be here tonight, but it's been a real pleasure to serve you in Washington, D.C. My heart, my home, my family, my farm is in Kansas. And I think that's what makes me different than a lot of my colleagues, because I come home every weekend. I got 4 young kids, lovely wife. But I tell you, like most Kansans, I'm worried about the future. Status quo is not an option, ladies and gentlemen. 22.7 million unemployed Americans, that's not good. $17.5 trillion of debt, we can do better. If we're going to come together to restore the American dream, we need to move beyond the bad policies of the last six years of this president, of control in Washington. We need more freedom and liberty, not less. And I'll tell you, what we did on the VA, shaking up a bureaucracy and replacing it with choice for our veterans. We can do that all across our federal agencies. We're going to have to do that if we're going to restore what's great about Kansas. But right now, we're doing much, much better than the rest of the state. That's good to see because of a prosperous energy sector, because of entrepreneurs, and a healthy Kansas ag sector. We're going to continue to defend all the above. Thank you for your support. Look forward to making sure everybody votes in the next, between now and November.
Before everyone leaves, I have a couple of closing comments. I'm not going to run through the entire ballot as I did in the first 2 sessions, but I do want to say that we are quite pleased in Salina that the Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women Voters were able to stage this forum. To our knowledge, this is the only forum in which Mr. Huelskamp and Mr. Giroux have appeared thus far in the election, and we thank both candidates very much for your comments tonight. Again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Salina and the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, we want to thank you all for coming tonight. We encourage everyone to educate themselves on the contents of the ballot, particularly the 4 questions that are going to come up for Salina and Saline County voters. We want to thank again Kansas Wesleyan University. This is the largest forum of this kind we've had in many, many years, and it's the first and only time at this point where we've had it at historic Pioneer Hall, Sam's Chapel of Kansas Wesleyan University. Thank them. Thanks again to the members of the League and the Chamber that worked hard to make this event possible. Have a good evening, stay awake, drive safely, and good night. And remember to vote starting next week, the 15th, or November 4th, the traditional day.